Hi, everybody. Welcome to Christian Homestead. My name is Jared. I got an email from Wanda Luce. Subject line, Second Coming Talk You've Never Read or Heard. Well, I'm always looking for those. In the email, hello, Jared. Thank you so much for your podcasts. I greatly enjoy them. There is a Second Coming talk that I am certain you have never heard or heard of. When I was in the missionary training center preparing for my mission to Germany, we were all invited to come over and sing the Battle Hymn of the Republic on July 4th, 1976. Wow, what a day to do that. Elder Benson gave a beautiful patriotic 4th of July talk that contains many significant comments relating to the Second Coming and the Millennium. I was there and heard them personally, but I was never able to find a copy of it anywhere, including a printed one. Maybe you could figure out how to do that and edit to your extensive collection. It was a steak fireside in the Marriott Center at BYU. Thank you again so much for your amazing presentations. Sincerely, Wanda Luce. Well, thank you so much for the email. And I searched, and I think I may have found it. You gave two details. One is that it was a talk by Elder Benson, presumably Ezra Taft Benson. I did find a talk that somewhat resembles what you described. This is from President Ezra Taft Benson, at that time president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, but it was on March 28th, 1977, a talk called God's Hand in Our Nation's History. And he only briefly mentions the Second Coming at the end of the talk. Although there is another part of this talk that I want to share with you because it's a quote. Well, it's actually a couple quotes I didn't have that I needed for my spreadsheets. Then I came across this. This is Elder Marky Petersen of the Quorum of the 12. And this was on July 4th, 1976. And because it was a BYU speech, I'm assuming that it was given in the Marriott Center. So this is most likely what you attended, I'm guessing. So it seems that it was Elder Marky Petersen. If there was some other talk that day, I was not able to find it. But what he talked about in the talk does match up with what you remember. So this is probably it. Okay, so he said, "What is that destiny? You'll be surprised when I say this, but it is nevertheless true. The destiny of the United States of America is to play an important part in helping to prepare for the second coming of Christ. It is that important. That is the reason the United States was set up." Now, it's interesting because recently we got a quote from Elder Rasband. He was speaking at some America 250 event. And I was surprised that he brought up the fact that the continents of the earth were divided for this very purpose, so that the Americas could be separate from the rest of the world, so that this land could be used as a base of operations for the church when it was restored and on up until the second coming. All right, continuing. The preparation for the second coming of Christ depended largely on the restoration of the gospel. There could not be a restoration of the gospel without freedom. God provided this country as the base of his operations in the latter days, as a place where there would be freedom, where he could restore his gospel. Therefore, the United States was given and is yet to be given a great mission in respect to the second coming of the Lord Jesus Christ. Now, we're going to be focusing a lot on this. He says, is yet to be given a great mission, because he expands on that, and that led me to a few interesting places. Okay, God has made the United States the base of operations for his work in these modern times, just as he used Palestine as his center of operations in ancient times. We should always keep this clearly in mind. As Palestine was the center of the Lord's operations in ancient times, just so, in the same manner, is the United States the center of his operations in these days. That little paragraph right there is interesting because it's like a chiasmus. You have United States, Palestine in the middle. Okay, For centuries, he preserved this land from colonization by unwanted groups. Then he set up this nation by his power and for his own purpose. That purpose was to provide the free conditions under which he could restore his gospel in the last days. Here, he gave us an inspired constitution so that his church could move forward with full guarantee of freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom of assembly, and freedom of press, all of which were essential to his work. Okay, now we're getting to what I really want to cover in this video. Dictatorship is the opposite of free agency. Free agency is part and parcel of the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. Hence, free agency was required here in America so that God's work could move forward. And so it must. For the day of the Lord draweth nigh, and the ultimate destiny of the United States is rapidly emerging. You would think that a lot of the destiny of the United States has already emerged, right? Because the church has already been established. It was established back in 1830. The saints, went to Utah, and that is where church headquarters currently is. And the gospel is spreading all across the earth. The last video that I did was about Mali. It turned out that a branch was set up in Mali, which is a predominantly Muslim nation. And in what I can only describe as a miracle, using video conferences, probably like Zoom or something like that, missionaries in Ivory Coast were able to give lessons to people in Mali. And it resulted in 3 big waves of baptisms. Well, actually, 2 have already taken place, and there's a 3rd wave that's coming. But all those people all those new converts came across the gospel from their friends. But anyway, I digress. So you would think that, what else is there to emerge as far as the destiny of the United States? What else is to emerge? He goes on to talk about the New Jerusalem. And I just want to point something out. So I have this spreadsheet called Timeline Missouri. I've made an update. This was going to be just a timeline of church history in Missouri because I've been curious to find out, when did the church start coming back? When did we get the first branch and the first stake? And how did things unfold? And it's been very enlightening. Well, I've combined this with my Community of Christ timeline because it's just helpful to see the different splinter groups in the church all on one spreadsheet. So if it's in blue, then that's our church. If it's in green, that's the RLDS/Community of Christ. If it's in red, got some red on here. If it's in red, then that's Church of Christ Temple Lot. So I just want to see how things have progressed here in Missouri. Now, this talk that we're reading from was given in 1976. And that was just a couple years, just a few years after a few key events in Missouri. The late 60s and early 70s were a time of great activity in Missouri. The church was doing a lot of stuff here. Let's just do a quick review because I'm trying to answer the question, what did he mean by the ultimate destiny of the United States is rapidly emerging? It may have to do with this. Okay, 1966, June 1st, President David O. McKay visits Independence, Liberty Jail, and Adam-ondi-Ahman. At this time, I still have to find exactly when this happened, but he brought in President Alvin R. Dyer, who was the former mission president of the Central States Mission, who had been involved in all these different Missouri historical societies. He brought him in as a counselor in the first presidency with the aim of purchasing lands in Missouri and in doing different things. So just a few months later, December 5th of that same year, that's when the church purchased 140 acres of Adam-ondi-Ahman from Frederick W. and Joyce J. Dustman. The land included Spring Hill, which is the temple site and where Adam's altar of sacrifice was. So Adam-ondi-Ahman, essentially, I think that this was the first purchase of Adam-ondi-Ahman land. Okay, in 1968, ground was broken for the Independence Visitors Center, which was dedicated May 31st of 1971. And I'm not going to go through the quotes, but we have discovered over the course of this channel that the Independence Visitor Center was built to be one of the 24 temples of the 24 temple complex. If you're waiting for a temple to be built in Independence, Missouri, you're looking at one. For all I know, this might be the temple that Christ appears in if that's how things play out. But it's a temple in waiting. They built it according to the dimensions that were revealed to Joseph Smith for the temple buildings. So we have this, which is a really important development. I think this might be why we always see an uptick in General Conference for these years when it comes to Second Coming terms. We're also interested in the auditorium, by the way. We have an interesting quote from Elder Orson Pratt where he described the primary temple as being much bigger than the rest, bigger than temples that we currently make, that it would be circular and arched over the top, and that thousands of people would be able to sit inside of it. So, I don't know. Okay, so, and then this is also when they beautified the far west temple site. So there were a lot of things going on with historic church sites during this period. So just a few years later, we have Elder Marky Petersen saying, for the day of the Lord draweth nigh, and the ultimate destiny of the United States is rapidly emerging. And he has more to say about that. Really quick, I just want to show you one more thing while we're on this spreadsheet. Let's go up to 2012. I just realized something. I recently did a post on Facebook talking about the fact that you had these three major transfers of property from Community of Christ to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The first of these three took place in 2012. It included Hans Mill, the Far West Burial Ground, Joseph Smith Sr. home in Kirtland, Ohio, and 6,000 acres of Missouri farmland, which I think that's farmland in and around the Far West area. I realized that was the day before the Kansas City, Missouri temple was dedicated. The month before, you had this: the governors of Missouri and Kansas released proclamations acknowledging the contributions of members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So that was ahead of the temple dedication. The day before the dedication, you had this big transfer of property that I didn't realize until just recently. And, the Kansas City temple, I think that this is significant. It seems like 2012 was an important year. It was an important year for the church because it was the Mormon moment, right? You had Mitt Romney running for president. You had the I'm a Mormon campaign. You had the Book of Mormon musical, which actually I think has helped the church because it's put the church on more people's radar. But there were also these interesting things going on in Missouri, significant things. This is the closest operational temple that we have to Jackson County, Missouri. This is in Clay County, and it's in Kansas City limits. But I think that this was highly significant that this temple was built. And then I just found out on Sunday that this was dedicated. So May 19th, dedication of Caldwell County Welcome Center in Kingston, Missouri. The center includes a quote-unquote Mormon room. I happen to come across this article in the Church News Archives talking about this. Here's the Mormon room. And I had actually seen this before. This is my other channel called Explore Church Sites. And I was going to see a historical marker on the public square. And I started like over here. And as I was walking toward the public square, I saw this building, Caldwell County Historical Society. I figured it was just a generic historical society, but it turns out that they have something in there that has to do with the history of the church. They have like a replica room. So anyway, a flurry of activity in the late 60s and early 70s, and then a flurry of activity in 2012. Let's go back to this talk. He said, here in the USA, the Lord's Latter-day Zion has been established already. Okay? The Lord's Latter-day Zion has been established already. Then, right after that, he says, here in the USA, his Latter-day New Jerusalem will yet be established. This is a quote that I need for my spreadsheet called Quotes, Common Misconceptions. There's the idea that the New Jerusalem being built in Jackson County has been abandoned, that now it's going to be Salt Lake City, or, that's something that the church tried to do, but now it's been excused, and it has not been excused. First of all, we have that in the scriptures themselves, when the Lord says that there's no other place that I've appointed in reference to Jackson County. But I have all these other quotes. In fact, this is the one common misconception that I have the most quotes and scriptures for. Oh yeah, here's that scripture. Doctrine and Covenants 101, 17 through 20. Zion shall not be moved out of her place. And then it talks about a return. And then in verse 20, there's none other place appointed than that which I have appointed. Neither shall there be any other place appointed than I have appointed. But this quote from Elder Petersen, this is significant, I think, because at this point in 1976, Salt Lake City had been established for a long time, right? So if he's saying that the New Jerusalem will yet be established, Salt Lake City is already established. So what is he referring to? It's similar to what President Oaks said. At this time, he was Elder Oaks in the Quorum of the 12. This was also a BYU devotional, January 29th, 2002. And he talks about the New Jerusalem. He says, for example, many of us or our descendants will doubtless participate in the fulfillment of prophecies about the building of the city of New Jerusalem. But in this matter, the timing is the Lord's, not ours. We will not be approved or blessed in clearing the ground or pouring the footings for that great project until the Lord has said that it is time. It's Salt Lake City, the area had already been cleared and built. We now have a major American city right there in Salt Lake City. So this is something that has not happened yet. We're still waiting for the actual city of New Jerusalem. And that's backed up in various church manuals like Gospel Principles, Doctrine and Covenants Student Manual. You have it on the church website under Gospel Topics and Questions. At the bottom here, the New Jerusalem, which will be built up in Jackson County, Missouri. And most importantly, here we have it from President Nelson, where he says, he will reign and rule from two world headquarters, from Jerusalem of old and from New Jerusalem in Jackson County. So there is no debate, there is no dispute. It is going to be built in Jackson County, Missouri. Now, we do have that quote from Bruce R. McConkie where he says, there could be a partial, we don't have a perfect timeline. There could be things that are a partial fulfillment before the second coming and then a more complete fulfillment after the second coming. So as we look at things like the Independence Visitor Center and potentially the auditorium, maybe this is a partial fulfillment. Maybe things can happen in these buildings without the entire city being built before the second coming. Okay, so let's go back to the talk. Here in the USA, the Lord will preside during the millennium. From here will go forth the law and the word of the Lord to all the nations of the earth. The restored gospel is already going from this land to all other free nations. It does so under the protection of the United States, and we who travel do so on American passports. Eventually, okay, now this is an interesting sentence right here. So he's not talking about now in 1976. He says, eventually, America will be the center of the final gathering of God's people. I mean, isn't it already in 1976? Church headquarters is in Salt Lake City. The Salt Lake Temple has been built. By this point, I don't know how many missions there were in the church, but the church had already gone to so many different countries throughout the world. So what does he mean? Eventually, America will be the center of the final gathering of God's people as the millennium approaches, and our flag will fly right on into that blessed time. Well, it made me think of another quote. In fact, now that I have these two quotes, I made it its own topic on my quotes A through Z spreadsheet. So this is the new row 470 for New Jerusalem final gathering. And now I'm starting to think that there is a type of final gathering. Before I read this, though, I want to make clear that the entire church is not going to come to Missouri. I have plenty of those quotes. Here's one from Elder Orson Pratt. We shall go back to Jackson County, not that all this people will leave these mountains. We have this from Brigham Young, Journal of Discourses. Are we going back to Jackson County? Yes. When? As soon as the way opens up. Are we all going? Oh no, of course not. The country is not large enough to hold our present numbers. In the days of Brigham Young, it couldn't hold the present numbers. When we do return there, will there be any less remaining in these mountains than we number today? No. There may be 100 then for every single one that there is now. And then I have tons of other quotes. You can access my spreadsheets anytime. The link is in the description box of each video. So with that being said, what's the final gathering? Is this a thing? It seems like it is. And it seems like it's maybe not like a gathering of the entire church, but maybe it's just this area being built up. What I've been seeing with my own eyes since I moved here. Okay, so this is from, at the time, Elder Alvin R. Dyer, assistant to the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. Again, he became a counselor in the first presidency. And I think he sheds some light on this. We're not going to read this whole thing. This is also a BYU devotional. This is February 7th, 1967. And the name of the talk is The Center Place of Zion. Okay. He said, as we contemplate this great event of the future, our thoughts, referring to Adam-ondi-Ahman, our thought broadens to the prophecies of Joseph Smith of the gathering, the gathering of the saints out of the world in response to the message of the restoration. For said he of events preceding the final gathering of the saints to the center place of Zion. He's referring to Jackson County. For said he, Joseph Smith, of events preceding the final gathering of the saints to the center place of Zion, and we are acquainted with the initial preparations which God made in the first settling of the consecrated and dedicated land of Zion in Jackson County, Missouri, wherein God knew the beginning and the end. He knew that the saints would not redeem Zion at that time, and they were subsequently expelled. And in light of that expulsion, there came to the prophet Joseph Smith the manner in which the children of God would be gathered from throughout the world in preparation for the day when the revelation would come that would begin the final gathering of the children of God from throughout the world. He goes on to talk about the gathering that's going on right now, that all of North and South America is Zion. But he says at this part, the whole of America is Zion itself from north to south, and is described by the prophets who declare that it is Zion, where the mountain of the Lord shall be, and that it should be in the center of the land. When the elders shall take up and examine the old prophecies in the Bible, they will see it. That's a quote from Joseph Smith. In the prophecies of Micah, Isaiah, and Nephi, and later in the revelations from God contained in section 133 of the Doctrine and Covenants, we learn that the term mountain of the Lord's house means the place where the authority and where the power of God resides. And that the mountains referred to are not specifically geographical eruptions, but pertain to the house of God. The psalmist once said that he prayed that this mountain would be faithful unto the commandments of God, and this mountain to be above all other mountains means that it shall rise above all other houses and all other kingdoms, all other kingdoms of the earth. Later on, I'm going to skip down. The Zion of God, or the place where the city of the New Jerusalem shall be built, which shall be the first of the cities of Zion, shall therefore be established in Jackson County, Missouri. I don't think he talks anymore about the final gathering. He just goes on to talk about the actual city with the 24 temple complex and stuff like that. So, I don't know, you guys. I wonder if that's happening right now. There are so many people that are moving to this area. I've talked about it a million times over. House prices are very expensive west of Kansas. That's why we ended up in Kansas initially to have a homestead, and then later we moved to Missouri. And we've met plenty of other people that have moved here for the same reason. They just want to be able to live and be able to purchase a house. And I think that this is the doings of the Lord. And we've seen a lot of things develop in this area. I'm not going to cover all that right now, but I've done a video recently about that. So we might be in that final gathering period that these two are talking about, Alvin R. Dyer and Mark E. Petersen. One other thing I just wanted to point out, I realized as I was looking at this, I I saw this quote from President Russell M. Nelson. At this time, he was Sunday School General President. This was 1974, and it was also a BYU devotional. This is one of his quotes where he talks about the New Jerusalem being in Jackson County. But what I didn't realize was this. He actually kind of talks about what's going to happen when Christ comes to Jackson County, presumably as part of his appearance. So there's the 4 appearances. The first one to Adam-ondi-Ahman, the second one to the New Jerusalem, which I don't know if that just means the entire church. I don't know if that means, general conference. I don't know if it means going to the temple and having a personal encounter with Christ, either seen or unseen. But if it's a literal thing where he actually physically appears in Jackson County, I have wondered what's supposed to happen there, because we have a lot that talks about what's supposed to happen at Adam-ondi-Ahman, but not as much as to what's supposed to take place in the New Jerusalem. And President Nelson talks about it. He just says this little part, to be sustained as King of Kings. Now, I thought that was something that happens at Adam-ondi-Ahman. That's like where there's a political transfer of power, as well as an ecclesiastical one where he receives the priesthood keys. But maybe there's like another general sustaining that takes place from Jackson County. Maybe if the church purchases the auditorium from Community of Christ, could you imagine if there's like a special general conference or a session of general conference that's held in the auditorium and broadcast to the world, and Christ appears there, and then we sustain him as King of Kings? I think that's a possibility. So we have that. So I added this to my quotes A through Z spreadsheet, row 51 for appearances, number 2 to the New Jerusalem. We also have a couple other things that have been said, but not a whole lot. This is from Elder Charles W. Penrose. He later became a member of the First Presidency. He said, "First, the saints of God gathered to one place on the western continent called Zion, busily preparing for his appearance in their midst as their Redeemer, who had shed his blood for their salvation, now coming to reign over them and to reward them for their labors in establishing his government." Later, he expands on that. "Among the first mentioned of these three classes of men, the Lord will make his appearance first." Okay, let's try that again. "Among the first mentioned of these three classes of men, the Lord will make his appearance first, and that appearance will be unknown to the rest of mankind. He will come to the temple prepared for him, and his faithful people will behold his face, hear his voice, and gaze upon his glory. From his own lips, they will receive further instructions for the development and beautifying of Zion and for the extension and sure stability of his kingdom." He seems to be talking about the New Jerusalem in Jackson County, but he may have an incomplete understanding. Maybe it's Christ coming to all of his temples. I don't know. And then we have this from Elder Orson Pratt down here in the red. "For he will suddenly come to his temple, and he will purify the sons of Moses and of Aaron until they shall be prepared to offer in that temple an offering that shall be acceptable in the sight of the Lord. In doing this, he will purify not only the minds of the priesthood in that temple, but he will purify their bodies until they shall be quickened, renewed, and strengthened." So that's kind of a big thing. If your body is quickened, if he's using it in the sense of like your body actually changing. And I think that is how he's using that word. That's kind of a big deal. And oh yeah, he says, and they will be changed, and they'll be partially changed, not to immortality, but changed in part, that they can be filled with the power of God, and that they can stand in the presence of Jesus and behold his face in the midst of that temple. Okay, yeah, that is what he meant. That's pretty much all that I know at the moment of what's supposed to happen during Christ's appearance to the New Jerusalem and when he comes to his temple, whether that's the temple here in Independence or whether it's all of his temples worldwide. I have no idea. This is all I know, is what they said. Okay. So, yeah, so it's just interesting. He talks about the fact that the ultimate destiny of the United States is rapidly emerging. So it seems like it hadn't fully emerged by 1976, in that there's going to eventually be a final gathering to this. Okay, eventually America will be the center of the final gathering of God's people. So interesting stuff. Let's go ahead and move on to President Ezra Taft Benson. This is 1977, and there are a couple of things I wanted to read from here. I may make another video about some other stuff that is in this talk. All right, he says, "Many great events have transpired in this land of destiny. This was the place where Adam dwelt. This was the place where the Garden of Eden was located." That's another thing that I needed, because sometimes people don't want to believe or accept that the Garden of Eden was here in Jackson County, Missouri. Let's go to my spreadsheet called Quotes A through Z. This is currently row 244 for Garden of Eden. So I've added this quote to this collection of quotes. This goes all the way back. The earliest quote that I have is from Reed Peck, an early church member. He talked about Joseph Smith teaching that. We have it from Brigham Young. Heber C. Kimball, George Q. Cannon, Wilford Woodruff, Orson F. Whitney, and on and on and on. I already had another quote from Ezra Taft Benson on here, but now I have two. And yeah, and then the most recent one is from Elder Ronald A. Rasband. He didn't specify Jackson County in his talk, but he talked about the fact that I'll just read it. In the Garden of Eden, in what today we consider the heartland of America. So the Garden of Eden being in the heartland of America. So that is important to realize. That's why the New Jerusalem is going to be here. President Joseph Fielding Smith said that they're the same place. The Garden of Eden and the city of New Jerusalem, it's the same place. You have the site of the fall, right? Where mortality began when Adam and Eve were cast out of the Garden of Eden, the initiation of this whole process, the site of the fall. And then you have Jerusalem, the other world capital. That's the site of the atonement, the solution to the fall. So it kind of makes sense. All right, continuing. It is here that Adam met with a body of great high priests at Adam-ondi-Ahman shortly before his death, and gave them his final blessing in the place to which he will return to meet with the leaders of his people. Oh, I just realized something. To meet with the leaders of his people. Holy cow. Well, I'll have to add that to my Adam-ondi-Ahman, on quotes A through Z. I have quotes that talk about who is going to be at Adam-ondi-Ahman. I think there's a general belief that everybody's going to be there. And I'm not so sure that that's the case. We may all participate without actually being in the valley of Adam-ondi-Ahman. It may be through general conference. It may be through other ways. But I have quotes that talk about the fact that it seems like the actual gathering, the physical gathering at Adam-ondi-Ahman for a conference, it's only going to be a few people. Let's just go to it. Let's go up to Adam-ondi-Ahman. Sorry, I didn't plan on talking about this because I just realized that in this quote that we're reading. Adam-ondi-Ahman, how many and who will be there? So we have this from, at the time, Elder Joseph Fielding Smith. The members of the church at large will not know of it. The saints cannot know of it except those who officially shall be called into this council. Well, that lines up with what we're reading from Ezra Taft Benson. He will return to meet with the leaders of his people. The leaders of his people. Yeah, that matches up. Oh my gosh. Let's see. We have this from Alvin R. Dyer. He says, in reference to Adam-ondi-Ahman, we're given to understand that many others by appointment will be present at this great priesthood meeting, but the world will not know of it, nor will many within the church. And then we have this from Randall C. Bird, CES Associate Director and Instructor, Ogden LDS Institute. He tells a story. This was at a BYU Education Week. And he told a story where I think he was a stake president, because it seemed like it was like a leadership meeting for stake presidents. And there was an apostle. He didn't name who the apostle was, but Randall C. Bird asked a question about, who's going to Adam-ondi-Ahman? How am I going to find out if I'm going? And the answer was, if you're to be there, it will come through the priesthood by appointment. So, okay, now we have this from Ezra Taft Benson. The place to which he will return to meet with the leaders of his people. This was the place of 3 former civilizations: Adam's, the Jaredite, and the Nephite. This was also the place where our Heavenly Father and His Son, Jesus Christ, appeared to Joseph Smith, inaugurating this great and last dispensation. The Lord has also decreed that this land should be the place of the New Jerusalem, which should come down out of heaven, the holy sanctuary of the Lord. You guys, I think it's possible that there might be buildings or temples even that come down, but I tend to think that the New Jerusalem that's coming down is simply the resurrected saints from previous dispensations. That's just my own opinion, but that seems to be the case. Here is our nation's destiny: to serve God's eternal purposes and to prepare this land and a people for America's eventual destiny. He established he established the constitution of this land by the hands of wise men who he raised up unto this very purpose, and redeemed the land by the shedding of blood. Okay, I think that we covered everything. I'm starting to lose my voice. I'm so sorry about that. There's one thing that I missed, but it's okay. All right, so I'm really glad that we came across this talk again, and we were able to pull out more details and organize my spreadsheets a little bit more. That's going to be it for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.